We will be managing my father-in-law's inheritance of $3 million and all the apartment buildings he owned, so don't worry.
My sister-in-law declares proudly. She seems so thrilled, now smiling at my father's portrait. What a devil. However, this woman seriously misunderstands something. Until the truth is revealed, I will wait patiently. I'll never let someone like her take everything from my father. My name is Christy White. I'm a 45-year-old single woman.
Christy, can you do the final check on the design plans that are due tomorrow?
Got it, Dad.
With that request from my father, Mike, I began the final review of the delivery materials. I work as an office manager and designer at my father's architectural firm. I had been interested in my father's work since I was a kid and always wanted to follow in his footsteps. That's why I studied architecture and design in high school and college, and upon graduation, started working with him to run the business. My father had officially named me the next manager, and I had earned the trust of our employees. I have an older brother, John, who is 5 years older than me, but he has no interest in design at all. He likely won't get involved in running or managing the company in the future, so I don't have to worry much about succession issues. The company is small, with only about 15 employees, but it's the one my father inherited from my grandfather. I always wanted to protect and cherish this company. That's what I believed.
Dad, I've finished my part, so I'm heading home. I'll start preparing dinner.
All right. Thanks for your hard work.
My father insisted that employees leave work on time unless something urgent came up. By 6 p.m., most employees had already gone home, leaving just my father and me at the office. He always stayed late to handle miscellaneous tasks, saying,
It's the manager's job to put in the sweat and effort.
I had always respected him for that. That said, my father was already 75 years old then. He wasn't young, so I wished he wouldn't push himself too hard. When I got home, the house was completely dark. My mother passed away in an accident when I was in my 20s, so it's just my father and me living together. I turned on the lights and was about to start preparing dinner when I heard the door creak open.
Oh, Christy, you're home.
It was my brother's wife, Cindy. What could she be doing at dinner time?
What brings you here at this hour?
I'm not here for you. Where's Mike?
Cindy's tone wasn't just curt. It was outright rude, and to be honest, I had never liked her. She, too, had disliked me since the beginning of her marriage to John.
You're still single and leeching off your father, how irresponsible. We'll be in trouble if you try to rely on us when you're old, you know.
That was her favorite phrase. I didn't leech off my father, I earned my own living, and I had no intention of relying on John and Cindy in my old age. Trying to deny her accusations was pointless. No matter what I said, she always fired back with something else.
You say you're not leeching off Mike, but you work at his company, don't you? You don't know what'll happen when you get older. Start saving for retirement now.
She never stopped attacking me. Talking any further with someone with such ill will toward me was meaningless, so I tried to avoid interacting with Cindy as much as possible. John and Cindy married in their 40s, so they didn't have any children. Still, she had the nerve to say things like,
Not having even one child. What a burden on society.
If that's the case, then Cindy herself was also. That thought crossed my mind, but I knew it was a forbidden topic. John once told me,
Cindy had a serious illness in the past, so she can't have children. Please don't bring it up.
She couldn't have children even if she wanted to, but she looked down on people who choose not to have them? What in the world did John see in her to marry her? Those days, that question lingered in my mind constantly. I didn't want to bother with it.
When is Mike coming home?
I think he'll be home late today. He mentioned stopping by the apartment before coming back.
Huh, that apartment, huh?
Cindy smirked slyly. My father managed an apartment separate from this house. It originally belonged to my grandfather and was inherited by my father. Although he no longer owned the property, he still cherished it, saying,
It's something I received from my dad.
he often checked on it, making sure everything was in order. Even tasks like cleaning and weeding, which should be handled by the management company, were things he took care of himself. The tenants spoke highly of him for that. Once Cindy realized my father wouldn't be coming home soon, she gathered her things and prepared to leave. What on earth was her purpose for coming?
Make sure you tell Mike I came to visit. Got it? Don't forget.
She ordered me before glancing around the house suspiciously and then left.
So, Cindy came by. I wonder what she wanted.
Who knows? She's dropped by when I was home alone too, but all she does is sit around without doing anything in particular. Honestly, I'm glad I wasn't home.
My father said with a wry smile. Neither of us could figure out her intentions, and we both tilted our heads in confusion. She's like an alien. Maybe she had some thought process normal people can't understand. Either way, I didn't really care.
Christy, dinner was delicious as always. Thank you.
My father expressed his gratitude more warmly than usual.
What's with you all of a sudden? You're acting weird.
I teased him, and he gave an embarrassed chuckle.
You've really grown, Christy. Maybe it's time for me to retire.
What are you talking about? I still have so much to learn from you.
Really? Okay, I'm heading to the shower and then to bed. Good night.
Good night.
A week later, my father collapsed at work. I was in the middle of a meeting with a client when one of the employees called me.
Christy, Mike is.
My father was rushed to the hospital in critical condition and unconscious. I immediately wrapped up my work and went to the hospital, calling John right away, and then Cindy. John assured me he would come to the hospital immediately, but Cindy said,
Oh my, do I really need to go? You're already there, aren't you?
Excuse me?
How could she say something like that when her father-in-law was in a life-threatening condition? Yet, arguing with her would get me nowhere. Trying to be the bigger person, I decided to persuade her.
Cindy, my father doesn't have much time left. Couldn't you come to see him, even just for a moment? You've come to check on him often before, haven't you?
Her response was beyond belief.
Oh, I was just sucking up to him, hoping to get some details about the inheritance.
I was speechless at her shameless words.
I don't like hospitals. Besides, if there's a funeral, I'd want to take care of my hair and nails first. I just don't have time to go to the hospital.
Cindy seemed almost excited. No way, this woman couldn't be human.
I see. Well, fine.
I raised my voice, unable to suppress my anger. Surely, if she felt even a fraction of my frustration, she'd feel some guilt. At least, that's what I thought. However, her next words were,
Let me know when he's passed away. We're busy over here too.
She spat out those words as if tossing them carelessly, and my hatred for Cindy only grew. She wasn't just a difficult person. She was on another level. It made me furious to think of her as my sister-in-law, even by marriage. 2 hours later, my father passed away. He was 75 years old. We immediately began preparations for the wake and funeral. In times like these, there wasn't even a second to grieve. Nevertheless, my brother John, who was the person responsible for the funeral, strangely detached.
Hey, Christy, Dad didn't have any chronic conditions, did he? That was pretty sudden. So, what does a chief mourner even do? Do you know? Man, I have to give a speech. That's a pain.
He was 50 years old, and yet he couldn't even handle being the chief mourner properly. His casual attitude made me angry, but what infuriated me even more was Cindy.
Why should I have to take center stage just because I'm the eldest son's wife? It's so annoying. Christy, you do it.
She said, retreating to the back at every opportunity. Meanwhile, I was running around greeting attendees, coordinating with the funeral home, and dealing with company matters. I was so busy that I could have taken any help I could get. Since it's not her own parent, it might feel like a burden. However, her attitude was terrible. Before anger could take over, sadness began to weigh on me.
Well, Cindy has her own struggles, Christy. Just handle it for her, will you?
I wondered if he had any idea how awful his wife had been. Those words were on the tip of my tongue, but I swallowed them down. Speaking to my unproductive brother seemed futile. I ignored them entirely and focused on fulfilling my responsibilities. With help from other relatives, I managed to get through the funeral without a hitch. Later, during the next memorial service, the relatives gathered again and began sharing drinks.
In the end, he passed without much suffering. Your dad was lucky in that sense.
It was Elizabeth, my aunt and my father's sister, who spoke to me. She was 15 years younger than my father, still in her 60s, and more like an older sister to me than an aunt. As we reminisced about my father, Cindy suddenly stood in front of me with a commanding presence. Her aura was unmistakably that of a villain. If this were a TV drama, even someone tuning in for the first time would immediately knew she was the bad one.
All right, let's begin.
Begin what?
I asked her, tilting my head in confusion.
The inheritance discussion. John is the eldest son, so we'll take the $3 million in cash and that apartment. Oh, and I already checked the bank account.
Cindy's brought up the inheritance so unexpectedly, and my aunt and me exchanged our looks. That couldn't be. The bank account was intended to be accessible only by me. We were both so stunned that we couldn't say a word. Cindy, clearly thinking she was in charge, continued.
You have the company and this house, don't you? What more could you possibly want?
It's not about wanting more, it's just.
I tried to explain, but Cindy steamrolled ahead. Meanwhile, John sat beside her, completely uninterested, sipping his drink absent-mindedly.
Maybe I should raise the rent on that apartment. It'd bring in more income and make life easier for us. Heck, we could even rebuild it. Your dad really left us something great.
Cindy's loud, confident voice brought the entire room to a hush. One of the relatives, unable to hold it in, let out a small snicker. Another struggled to suppress laughter, and soon, one by one, people were covering their faces with handkerchiefs to stifle their chuckles. My aunt leaned in and whispered to me.
Is she joking?
If you have something to say it clearly.
Cindy crossed her arms and leaned back, staring at my aunt with a smug expression. All my aunt and I could do was force an awkward smile. I sighed and decided to explain everything from the beginning.
Well, Cindy, there's nothing left for John to inherit.
What do you mean? Nothing left? That can't be true. Are you trying to trick me?
The triumphant expression Cindy had just moments ago twisted into one of rage.
That's not it. The apartment was passed on to my aunt, and I inherited the company. All of this was settled through lifetime gifting before my father's passing, so there's nothing left for John to receive this time.
What? I didn't hear anything about this.
It was no surprise she didn't know. This all happened before she and John got married. Here's how it happened. I had been working at my father's company for years, learning directly from him. Naturally, he wanted me to take over the company. At first, I felt the responsibility was too heavy and declined several times. But he had a strong desire to pass the business on to one of his children. When I finally decided to take over, my father brought in an attorney to settle all inheritance matters properly.
As for the apartment, my father gifted it to my aunt and her husband while he was still alive. This was agreed upon when my grandfather's inheritance was settled. As for the company, everything was organized when I decided to take over, with John's approval. Finally, this house was also transferred to my name. So, as it stands, there is nothing left for John to inherit.
As I carefully explained each point, John suddenly spoke up, as if he'd just remembered something.
Oh yeah, now that you mention it, Dad gave me a lot of money as a lifetime gift. I didn't think much about it at the time and just spent it all.
Now that he mentioned it, I did recall John living extravagantly during his single years. He went on vacations abroad more than 3 times a year, started wearing items that cost 10 times what he used to buy, and even replaced his car multiple times a year.
So the apartment was Elizabeth's, huh? I always thought I'd inherit it.
It was likely John had carelessly said something like that to Cindy. Not knowing what a lifetime gift was, he had simply taken the money, nearly $1 million, and spent it all without a second thought. It wasn't hard to imagine that was exactly what had happened.
Well, then, what about the $3 million in the bank account?
Oh, that's just an old company account. It's no longer in use. But how did you even know that?
Well,
She must have found some documents in the safe. Had she pried it open with a wire or something? If so, she had quite the talent for it. Even my aunt frowned as she looked at Cindy. John muttered,
Did Dad hate me or something?
Huh?
I let out a flat sound, baffled by his nonsensical comment.
Christy, aren't you getting all the preferential treatment? I've used up all the money, and now I have nothing. Yet, you're getting the house and the company.
Listening to John speak like a child, my aunt stood up.
John, what are you saying at your age? Do you have any idea how much Christy has gone through to take over the company?
Aunt Lizzie.
She knew all about my struggles and the internal conflicts I'd faced before deciding to take over the business. That's why she spoke up for me.
John, you being broke is entirely your own fault. Spending money so recklessly. What did you expect?
Now that I think about it, my father often lamented John's extravagant spending.
Was it really a good idea to give him cash? With the way he's living, he's bound to ruin himself someday.
I had thought the same. Sure enough, within just a few years, John had blown through the entire amount he had been gifted.
Not leaving you any cash was your dad's final kindness, John. It was his way of telling you to work hard, earn your own money, and enjoy life with what you earned.
John hung his head, thoroughly chastised by my aunt's brutal scolding. However, Cindy was not ready to give up.
I never heard about any of this. Why was I the only one left out of the loop? I didn't even know that the apartment wasn't still Mike's.
Well, the lifetime gifting happened before you married into the family, so…
How could the eldest son's wife know nothing about this? It's ridiculous that Mike didn't tell me anything. This doesn't make any sense.
Judging by her frantic behavior, it seemed that my father had deliberately avoided discussing inheritance matters with Cindy. I had an idea why. My father didn't share anything with Cindy. Perhaps he had realized from the start what a greedy person she truly was.
There's nothing strange about this. It was my father's will.
Cindy's eyes widened in fury, and she shouted,
This is unacceptable. I'll take this to court.
You're not even a legal heir, so I don't think you have the right to sue or recover anything.
That set Cindy off. She began smashing things in a fit of rage, knocking over a vase that had been my mother's keepsake, shattering glasses on the table, and screaming incoherently. What was supposed to be a gathering to honor my father's memory turned into utter chaos. With help from John and other relatives, we managed to calm Cindy down, and the gathering came to an abrupt end.
Cindy, I'll be sending you the bill for the broken vase and glasses. I won't forgive you for trashing my father's house.
Shut up, you money-grubbing hag.
She yelled before dragging John out of the house. Honestly, if anyone's a money grubber, it's her. It was a day that reminded me just how ugly greed could make a person. I was once again reminded of how terrifying a person Cindy could be. Not long after, John and Cindy divorced. Surprisingly, it was my indecisive brother who initiated the divorce.
After seeing how obsessed Cindy was with money, staying married to her scared me.
Although John had no tangible assets left, he seemed to realize how much worse it could have been if he did. He said so, looking pale. Cindy was a housewife and initially refused the divorce, claiming she couldn't survive without him. However,
Turns out she had a criminal record for marriage fraud before we got married. When I brought that up with an attorney, she quickly agreed.
I was stunned by this revelation. Yet, considering her obsession with money, it wasn't entirely surprising. Honestly, I was relieved to no longer be related to someone like her. As his sister, I couldn't help but worry about John's poor judgment when it came to people since he had married a terrible woman.
Christy, oh sorry, I mean Miss White. There's a visitor for you.
One of my employees called out to me, and I stood up.
You don't need to correct yourself every time and call me Christy.
I said so, feeling a bit self-conscious about the title. However, I am a leader with the responsibility to protect this company and its employees.
Cat, you're the president. Come on, Christy, don't forget to give us a raise.
Another employee joked.
You're all such jokers.
Still, it made me happy to be recognized by my team as president.
I swear to protect this company no matter what.
I silently vowed as I handed a business card, printed with my title as president, to the visiting client.